In this video, I'm going to show you how I installed this type of spoiler on my Mazda Rx8. Alright, let's get to work. This is the spoiler that you'll get, and if we flip it over, you'll see these two brackets. Each bracket has a hole for a M6 bolt and another hole where these metal wires come out. For the purpose of this install, I got a separate trunk so I can better illustrate the process. We can see that the bottom of the bracket has a step, which is perfect because this means that we can position it on the trunk with the stock spoiler lip in place without having to remove it. As we can see, the fitting is perfect. No modifications required to make the spoiler fit nicely. We're gonna need two of these M6 bolts with a ring-shaped head to which we're gonna attach these hooks. And then finally, some metal wire, rope clamps and rings. To start, we got to take out the trunk cover. To do that, take a screwdriver and screw out all clips holding it in place. If some clips are hard to get out, use a clip prier like this one or a flathead screwdriver. Pry the clip with one hand and with the other screw out the small bolt. When done, take out the trunk cover and put it on the side. Now it's time to measure our trunk from one side to the other in this specific place above the spoiler lip. So the total length is 125 centimeters and the center of our trunk is at 62.5 centimeters. With that in mind, let's measure the trunk again and make two marks in the middle at 62.5 centimeters, one under the metal strip and another above it. Now get a level or another straight object and draw a line that connects the two dots you just marked. And there we have it. The middle of our trunk is now clearly marked. We can also double check it by comparing it to the rear light. Next, it's time to measure the inner distance between the brackets. And we can see that that is 41.5 centimeters. Half of it is 20.75 centimeters, which is the distance that we're gonna mark on each side of the middle of the trunk. We marked a line on the left, which is 20.75 centimeters from the center, and also one on the right, which is 20.75 centimeters from the center. Next up, we're gonna position the spoiler to check if the lines are correct. And yes, the spoiler sits perfectly on the lines, and also visually it looks very centered. Next, we're gonna use some masking tape to mask the bottom of the brackets, but be careful not to mask the inner part of the bracket. That part must be clear so we can use it to center the spoiler correctly. Do the same on the other bracket. Next, use a pencil to mark a hole in the tape where the bracket holes are located. With that done, let's position the spoiler on the trunk, making sure it's perfectly centered with the side lines that we drew. When the spoiler is nice and centered, use some masking tape to tape down the tape that we put on the brackets, like I'm doing. Make sure to do it on each side except the inner part of the spoiler, just like this. Next, it's time to slowly and carefully remove the spoiler. If you remember the two holes that we made in the masking tape, well, now it's time to mark those holes with a pencil so that they will be clearly visible on the trunk. Make sure to mark all 4 holes. Now let's measure the bracket holes again, and the distance between the two holes is 45 centimeters. And then the distance from our marked holes is 45. Excellent, it checks out. Now let's peel off the masking tape and recheck the measurements just to be sure. 45, excellent. So now if 45 is the total length, the center should be at 22.5 centimeters, meaning that the distance of each hole should be 22.5 centimeters away from the center. If we check the distance from our hole to the center, we got exactly 22.5 centimeters. So far, so good. Next, we're gonna need a 3mm drill bit and a 6mm one. Let's put the 3mm one on the drill and start drilling the upper hole where the bolt is supposed to go. Now that we've made these two holes, it's time to enlarge them with a 6mm drill bit. Next, we're not gonna drill a hole where the metal wire comes out because we would ruin the spoiler, so we're gonna drill it between the spoiler and the hole that we just drilled. So with the 3mm drill bit on, it's time to drill the hole on each side. And we're done. Next up, I'm gonna use this long thread rod just to see where it comes out on the other side. Okay, so the rod comes out along this line, and we're gonna take a pencil and trace the exact path that the rod takes, just like that. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Now it's time to put on a metal drill bit that is shaped like a round saw with a diameter of 3 centimeters, but also 4 is nice if you want more space to work. And we can start drilling in this exact position. While drilling, it's gonna smell like popcorn, so let me know if you also get the smell. Next, let's remove the 2 nuts that are holding the third brake light in place. Now mark a point on this exact place on each side, just like I'm doing. Now it's time to remove the trunk brake light. To do that, gently push it in from the exterior side, and once it's nice and loose, you can take it out from the interior side. Disconnect the power cable and put it on the side. Time to drill a hole on each of the 2 holes that we marked earlier. Firstly with a 3mm drill bit, and then later with a 6mm one. Next, we're gonna put to use our M6 Eyebolts. I'm gonna leave the thread to belong just 2 centimeters, although later I decided to shorten it to 1.5 centimeters. So even though I'm showing 2, I suggest you leave just 1.5 because it will be more than enough. So now it's time to mark both bolts on the same place with a marker. When done, screw on a nut so we can later restore the thread. Use a fixed clamp to hold the bolt in place, and while wearing protective gloves, cut the bolts on the marked spot. When done, we have to remove the nut and then put it back on. This way the thread will be restored. Put a washer under the nut and position the M6 Eyebolt in the holes that we just drilled. Slide on another washer from the bottom and then another nut. Tighten the nut with a ratchet until it's nice and tight. Repeat the same process with the hole on the other side. Next up, I'm gonna measure the thread length of my M6 bolts, which is 5 centimeters or 1.96 inches. Next, slide a washer on each bolt. Take the metal wire and feed it through the small hole that we drilled. I suggest you test fit the bolts in the holes, because if the hole is a millimeter too small or some millimeters out of alignment, now is the time to fix it by enlarging it with this metal grinding stick. What I like to do is to twist the grinding stick in order to enlarge the hole to the desired diameter. Now position the bolts in one at a time and have a friend hold the spoiler steady while you're doing this. When done, get the metal wire out of the way and tighten the bolt with a wrench, or you can use a ratchet. Before you start tightening, remember to pull on the metal wire so that it holds the spoiler down. Tighten the bolts until they are nice and tight. Alright, our spoiler is now almost completely secured on the trunk, just one less step to do. This is how the inside looks with the bolts installed. Next, it's time to install our hooks and latches. Make a circle with the wire, cross the 2 lines, and slide them under the metal wire clamp. Just like this. Once in place, gently secure it by tightening the bolt in the middle. Next, we need to install the metal ring on the circle that we just made. Test if the ring can reach the metal hook that we installed on the ring bolts. Adjust the length by tightening or loosening up the wire that I'm pulling with my left hand. Once you find the right length, tighten the middle bolt until it's nice and tight. I suggest you thread the wire like this so we can clamp the whole thing later to make it look nice and secure and also have a clean finish. So now let's connect our ring to the snap hook. And this is how the connection looks. Next, we're gonna use this other wire clamp. To start, remove the 2 nuts. Now we have to find the center of our trunk lid and mark a vertical line. On that vertical line, we're gonna mark the position of the 2 tiny clamp bolts. With that done, it's time to drill them with a 3mm drill bit. Now this part of the clamp will go on like this, and this represents the 2 threaded metal wires that we installed under the trunk lid. We're gonna position them in the middle of this clamp, and then we're gonna install this U-shaped lock to hold them down. Afterwards, we're gonna position the 2 bottom bolts of the U-shaped lock in the 2 small holes that we drilled. To finish, we're gonna install the nuts and tighten them in place. And we're done! No rattling sound in the trunk, and the spoiler is now securely installed on the car. Next, we're gonna use some silicone to fill the exposed holes so that water and moisture don't get in. It would be a nice idea to do a silicone ring under the bracket so that it keeps water out, but you can do that later after the spoiler has been painted. Next up, we have to reinstall the brake light. Simply position it in place with the connector facing to the left, screw on the 2 nuts and tighten them in place. Reconnect the connector to the light. It's a good idea to paint the holes that we drilled to prevent rusting. Don't worry about the big holes that we drilled because they will be hidden by the trunk cover. So now take that cover, position it in place, and screw inside every bolt that was holding it there. Install the plastic trim by simply pushing it in place. And we're finally done! The spoiler is securely installed on my RX8 and it instantly gives it a sportier look and makes it stand out from the others. Definitely a great alternative to the Mazda Speed one. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and check out more RX8 videos on my channel.